Hey, Paisa, levántase.
Did you know that in 2025, over 500,000 Americans are sleeping on the streets, many of them seniors and families with young children? That's right, grandparents, single mothers, toddlers, all without a roof over their heads. Some are living in their cars, others in overcrowded shelters, and far too many have nothing at all. This isn't happening in a distant war-torn country. This is happening right now, in the wealthiest nation on earth. But how did we get here? Why are people who spent their entire lives working, raising families, and paying taxes suddenly abandoned by the very system they supported? Why are more and more families ending up homeless, despite having jobs? The answers may shock you and challenge everything you thought you knew about poverty in America. In this video, we're uncovering 10 powerful and overlooked reasons behind America's growing homelessness crisis, especially how it's devastating seniors and working families. Stick around, because what you're about to hear might just change your perspective forever. Number 1. Skyrocketing housing costs. It's no secret that rent is rising, but in 2025, it's become downright unlivable for millions. In cities like Los Angeles, New York, and even mid-sized towns like Austin or Nashville, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment has soared past $2,000 per month, and that's just the average. For many families and seniors living on fixed incomes or low wages, these prices are completely out of reach. The math doesn't lie. A full-time worker earning the federal minimum wage, still just $7.25 an hour in many states, would have to work nearly 100 hours a week just to afford a modest two-bedroom apartment. Even in states with higher wages, housing costs have climbed much faster than income. According to the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, no state in the U.S. has enough affordable rental housing for extremely low-income households. For seniors, the situation is even more dire. Many older adults rely on Social Security benefits, which average about $1,900 a month in 2025. That's barely enough to cover rent in most cities, let alone food, medication, or transportation. These seniors aren't lazy. They're retired, disabled, or widowed. But when rent goes up and their income stays the same, the result is predictable. They lose their homes. Families, too, are being priced out of their neighborhoods. Longtime residents are watching helplessly as developers buy up properties, raise rents, and force tenants out. Many end up in motels, shelters, or cars, not because they don't work, but because their paychecks simply can't keep up with the cost of living. Housing isn't a luxury, it's a basic human need. Yet in America today, it's become a privilege reserved for the lucky few, while everyone else fights to stay afloat. Number 2. Stagnant wages. Imagine working full-time, sometimes even 2 or 3 jobs, and still not being able to pay your rent. That's not a rare story anymore. In 2025, wages for low and middle-income workers have barely moved, even as the cost of everything from gas to groceries has surged. While corporate profits hit record highs and executive salaries climb into the millions, everyday workers are falling further and further behind. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, real wages adjusted for inflation, have declined or remained flat for most workers over the past decade. This means even when people get small raises, their actual buying power goes down, because rent, food, and medical costs keep rising faster. For people living paycheck to paycheck, this creates a dangerous tipping point. One unexpected bill, one missed day of work, and they're on the brink of losing everything. And it's not just individuals. Entire families are affected. Picture a single mom working 2 part-time jobs with no benefits, or a senior who worked their whole life in a factory but now survives on a tiny pension that hasn't been adjusted for inflation in years. They aren't jobless, they're working and still homeless. Many industries like retail, food service, and caregiving pay notoriously low wages while demanding long hours and unstable schedules. These are the same jobs many seniors and parents rely on to survive. When wages don't keep up, housing becomes impossible. And homelessness stops being a personal failure, it becomes a system failure. Until wages are tied more closely to the real cost of living, no amount of budgeting can save the average American from falling behind. And for thousands, that means falling straight onto the streets. Number 3. The disappearance of affordable senior living. For millions of older Americans, the golden years have turned into a fight for survival. In 2025, affordable senior housing is vanishing at an alarming rate, leaving many elderly citizens without safe, stable places to live. These are people who spent decades working, raising families, and contributing to their communities. Yet now, they're being pushed to the margins. According to the Urban Institute, nearly half of all senior renters are considered housing cost burdened, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on rent. And for those living on fixed incomes like Social Security, which often totals less than $2,000 per month, even modest apartments are quickly becoming unaffordable. The result? Seniors are being forced into unsafe living conditions or worse, onto the streets. Many affordable senior housing complexes have been sold off to private investors or converted into high-end developments. Government funding for new senior housing has stalled, and waiting lists for subsidized units can stretch for years. In the meantime, thousands of older adults are aging in shelters, cars, or makeshift encampments with no access to healthcare, privacy, or proper nutrition. Imagine an 82-year-old woman with arthritis sleeping on a park bench, or a retired veteran living in his truck because he can't afford rent and medical bills at the same time. These aren't rare tragedies. They're becoming shockingly common. The elderly should be treated with dignity, not discarded when they can no longer produce income. But in a housing market driven by profit, seniors are often seen as bad investments. And unless urgent action is taken to protect and expand affordable senior housing, this crisis will only deepen. Number 4. Eviction epidemic post-COVID. When the pandemic hit in 2020, millions of Americans were protected, temporarily, by emergency eviction bans. But by 2025, most of those protections are gone. And what's left behind is a massive wave of evictions that's hitting vulnerable families the hardest. The COVID safety net has vanished, but the damage it prevented is now rushing in like a flood. Many renters are still dealing with backlogged rent debt from the pandemic years. Despite returning to work, they've struggled to catch up. And landlords, many of whom are now large corporate property owners, aren't showing mercy. As a result, eviction filings in 2025 are at record-breaking levels, with tens of thousands of families being forced out of their homes every month. According to Princeton's Eviction Lab, eviction rates in some cities have surged 30 to 40% above pre-pandemic levels. The process isn't just devastating, it's fast and ruthless. Families often receive just a few days' notice before they're expected to vacate. There's no time to plan, no money for moving, and often nowhere to go. Many end up in motels, overcrowded shelters, or sleeping in their cars. For children, this means switching schools, losing routines, and sometimes going without meals. For seniors, the trauma of displacement can be life-threatening. And what's most tragic, many of these people had housing, they weren't chronically homeless. They lost their homes not because they didn't care, but because the system gave up on them. Eviction is no longer just a legal process. It's become a pipeline to homelessness, one that's swallowing working families and older adults at an alarming rate. Without serious reforms to protect renters and forgive pandemic-era housing debt, this eviction epidemic will continue to push more people out of homes and into the streets. Number 5. Decline in mental health and addiction services. Behind many stories of homelessness is a silent struggle with mental illness or addiction. And in 2025, that struggle is being met with shrinking support and disappearing services. For years, mental health funding has been cut, facilities have closed, and outreach programs have been understaffed or underfunded. The result? Thousands of Americans are falling through the cracks. According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, over 20% of unhoused individuals live with severe mental health conditions, such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or PTSD. Many more face anxiety, depression, or trauma, yet access to treatment is limited, especially for those without stable housing or insurance. Waiting lists for community clinics are months long, and emergency services are stretched thin. For some, the only time they see a doctor is after an arrest or hospitalization. Addiction, too, plays a devastating role. The opioid crisis has worsened in recent years, with fentanyl overdoses reaching all-time highs. But rather than receiving help, many who struggle with addiction face criminalization instead of care. Jails become makeshift detox centers. The streets become graveyards for people who were never given a real chance at recovery. Imagine trying to hold a job, maintain housing, or stay healthy while battling untreated schizophrenia or opioid dependency, all without access to professional support. It's not a lack of willpower, it's a lack of resources. And as budgets continue to shift away from social services, this invisible crisis is pushing more people into visible suffering. Until mental health and addiction are treated as urgent public health priorities, not moral failings, America's homelessness crisis will remain impossible to solve. If this video moved you, let us know in the comments. What part hit you the hardest? We pour hours into making videos like this, so if you found it valuable, please subscribe. It's just one click, but it means the world to us. Number 6. Lack of affordable childcare. Childcare is supposed to help families stay on their feet, but in 2025, it's become one of the biggest reasons working parents are losing their homes. With average costs soaring past $17,000 per year per child, affordable childcare is now a luxury, not a lifeline. For single parents and low-income families, this creates a painful reality. If you can't afford childcare, you can't work. And if you can't work, you lose your housing. Many families are caught in a cruel cycle. They want to work, but every dollar earned goes toward daycare or babysitters. Some are forced to leave jobs to stay home with their kids, instantly cutting their income in half or losing it altogether. A parent shouldn't have to choose between feeding their child and having someone care for them while they work, but that's exactly the choice many face every day. Government subsidies and childcare assistance programs exist, but the demand is overwhelming. Waiting lists stretch for months or even years. In some areas, there simply aren't enough providers to meet the need. And even when help is available, the paperwork, qualifications, and delays make it nearly impossible for struggling families to access in time. The impact is heartbreaking. Families sleeping in cars while trying to get their kids to school. Parents missing job interviews because there's no one to watch their toddlers. Children growing up without stability. All because the cost of care is higher than a mortgage. Affordable childcare shouldn't be a dream, it should be a basic support system. Without it, families can't work, can't save, and can't stay housed. Fixing homelessness means fixing the systems that keep families working, and childcare is at the heart of it. Number 7. Gentrification and displacement. What happens when your neighborhood suddenly becomes trendy, but you can't afford to live there anymore? That's the brutal reality of gentrification in 2025. Across cities like San Francisco, Atlanta, Portland, and even smaller towns, entire communities are being priced out of the places they've called home for decades. Gentrification often starts with good intentions. New businesses, nicer parks, better schools. But when wealthier residents and developers move in, rents rise, property taxes spike, and longtime tenants get pushed out. The result? Working-class families, seniors, and even small business owners are displaced, sometimes within months. According to a 2024 Housing Justice Report, over 2.3 million Americans have been displaced by gentrification in the past 5 years alone. It's not just about losing a home, it's about losing a sense of community. Imagine watching your block transform from family-owned shops and local diners to luxury condos and boutique cafes. The people you grew up with, the schools your kids attend, even the grocery store down the street, all vanish. And when you're forced out, you don't always have somewhere else to go. For renters, protections are often minimal. Landlords might refuse to renew leases, hike up rents overnight, or sell properties to developers for massive profits. Once displaced, families struggle to find housing they can afford nearby. Many end up far from jobs, schools, and support networks, or on the streets. Gentrification doesn't have to mean displacement, but when profit is prioritized over people, it becomes a direct pipeline to homelessness. Solutions like rent control, community land trusts, and tenant protections can slow the tide, but only if they're implemented before families are pushed out. Number 8. Broken shelter system. When people lose their homes, the next line of defense should be emergency shelters. But in 2025, America's shelter system is overwhelmed, underfunded, and often unsafe, leaving thousands with nowhere to turn. For many, the harsh truth is this: the streets feel safer than the shelters. According to the National Alliance to End Homelessness, for every 3 people experiencing homelessness, there is only 1 available shelter bed. In many cities, shelters are full every night, turned away not because they're unworthy, but because there simply isn't room. The wait lists can be days or weeks long, and when people do get in, what they find can be shocking. Overcrowded rooms, unsanitary conditions, and even violence. Families with children are especially vulnerable. Many shelters are not equipped to house families together, forcing them to separate or sleep in unsafe conditions. Seniors face even greater risks, struggling with medical issues that shelters aren't prepared to handle. And for people with trauma, mental illness, or disabilities, the environment can feel more like a prison than a refuge. The system is broken not because it doesn't care, but because it's been ignored, under-resourced, and asked to do too much with too little. While shelters can save lives, they aren't long-term solutions. They're band-aids on a deeper wound. Worse yet, the stigma surrounding shelters keeps many away. People fear judgment, theft, or even assault. So instead, they sleep in cars, under bridges, or in public parks. Not because they want to, but because the alternative feels worse. Fixing homelessness requires more than beds. It requires dignity, safety, and real pathways to permanent housing. Until shelters are reimagined with compassion and funding, they will continue to fall short of what people truly need. Number 9. Rise in climate-driven displacement. Homelessness in 2025 isn't just about economics. It's also about the climate. Across the United States, natural disasters are forcing people out of their homes faster than ever before. Wildfires, floods, hurricanes, and extreme heat waves have become more frequent, more intense, and more destructive. For thousands of families, one storm is all it takes to become homeless. According to FEMA, the number of federally declared disasters has tripled over the past 20 years. Cities like New Orleans, Miami, and even inland towns have seen entire neighborhoods wiped out by rising waters or scorching heat. Many of the affected areas are home to low-income families who don't have insurance, savings, or the ability to relocate. When disaster strikes, they're left with nothing. No home, no plan, and no safety net. Take the case of a family in Florida who lost their mobile home to Hurricane Tyra in 2024. They applied for aid, but the process was slow, the paperwork overwhelming, and the help too little, too late. Now, they're living in a tent behind a strip mall, not because they made bad choices, but because the system failed to protect them. Climate displacement doesn't just happen overnight. In some places, it's a slow erosion, rising sea levels, failing infrastructure, unbearable heat making homes unlivable. In others, it's immediate, a tornado, a fire, a flood that takes everything in seconds. What's worse, many of these victims are left out of official homelessness statistics, making the crisis even harder to track and solve. We can't talk about homelessness without talking about climate change. As our planet grows more unpredictable, so does the housing crisis. And unless we invest in climate-resilient housing and fast response support systems, this disaster will keep repeating itself community by community. Number 10. Systemic failures in policy. At the heart of America's homelessness crisis lies a painful truth. The system isn't broken, it was built this way. Despite decades of debate, reports, and proposed reforms, housing policies in the U.S. continue to fail the very people they're supposed to protect. And in 2025, the cracks have widened into chasms. Many government programs meant to provide relief, like Section 8 housing vouchers or public housing, are underfunded, mismanaged, or burdened by years-long waitlists. According to HUD, some families wait 8 to 10 years for housing assistance. Others are disqualified over minor technicalities or paperwork errors. And while billions are spent on temporary shelters, there's often little investment in long-term solutions like affordable housing construction or mental health support. Worse still, housing policies are often shaped by politics, not people. Funding is cut. Laws vary wildly from state to state. In many areas, rent control is banned, tenant protections are weak, and landlords hold most of the power. Meanwhile, developers receive tax breaks to build luxury units that sit empty, while thousands sleep outside. The result is a system that treats housing like a commodity, not a human right. And when housing is only available to those who can pay top dollar, everyone else is left out in the cold. But here's the thing. Homelessness is not inevitable. It's the outcome of policy choices, and that means it can be changed. If we invest in people over profit, if we design systems that are preventative, not just reactive, we can start to reverse this crisis. Until then, the cycle continues, one eviction, one family, one policy failure at a time. Homelessness in America isn't just a statistic. It's a growing human tragedy unfolding on our streets every single day. Behind every tent, every sidewalk mattress, every parked car filled with belongings is a real story, a family, a senior, a child caught in a system that's failed them. And as we've seen, it's not just one reason. It's a storm of rising costs, stagnant wages, broken policies, and a crumbling support system that's pushing people out of their homes and onto the streets. But here's the truth that often gets lost. Homelessness is not a personal failure. it's a policy failure. It's not about laziness, addiction, or bad choices. It's about a country that hasn't prioritized housing as a basic human right. The good news? This crisis is solvable. With the right investments, the right laws, and the right mindset, we can build a future where no one is left behind. If this video moved you, even just a little, don't let it end here. Speak up, share this, ask questions, vote with your conscience. Because the moment we stop ignoring this crisis is the moment we start changing it. Together, we can do better, and we must.